how the mind works, why we behave the way we do, and the science behind human thought, emotion, and action. This is our first episode. I'm Daniel Lucas and the host of many 101 podcasts, and of course, my legendary co host, Mr. Mark L. Christensen.
Hello, thank you. Hi, Daniel.
Hello, Mr. Mark. Can you please introduce more about yourself? Because this is our first episode on Psychology 101.
Okay. Yes, I'm the author of Fungus Theory of Conscious Growth, and that is a book that describes all that exists for the development of a psychology and how it's evolved into the place and how the universe makes our psychological place the reason for everything. And
Psychological tastes. Well,
yes.
let's give a big hand ourselves, Mr. Mark, because this is our first episode, and we are
Hey.
looking for more episodes to come. Yes, yes, yes. So, Mr. Mark, what will be our topic for today?
Well, we're going to talk about, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold, so I'm going to clear my throat. But we're talking about limitations. The universe is hard to figure out unless you look at its limitations, and there's plenty of them. Um, and that's how you see the guardrails of what's being done, what's being made, and why we are who we are today. So today's topic is called perspective and perception limitations. Why is this a limitation, and why is it important? And it is very important because this is how you see your place in the world of your own psychology with everyone else and how it applies to fungus theory. So um, I don't know if you have the diagram up there because I'm not looking
Mhm.
at the.
The
Yeah, if you can
diagram
see that. Yeah,
here,
it's a little
yes.
small, but I'll
Can I
help you
make it
out.
big? Can I make it bigger?
You can if you'd
Wait.
like. You
Yes,
can.
just give me a minute. I can make it bigger over here. Wait, here we go. Where is it? I cannot, mister. Did I
That's
choose
okay.
one?
No,
Okay,
but I'll just show you what's going on here. So this
okay.
so this is how I've been able to measure it out from an individual's perspective. We'll talk about perspective and its limitations first, and then perception and its limitations second. So when a person's born, and in the middle of this circle, it's what it says here on the bigger page, where it says 360 degrees of of perspective at birth. See where it says that?
Mm,
It also says on the other side a 12-month calendar year. So it serves two purposes. Like it's kind of uh like like your Virgo. What do they call that? Virgo and I don't study that, but what is it? The
figure
celestial. Yeah, your
chart.
Virgo and Pisces
Mm-hmm.
and all that. It's kind of like that, but I'm not saying that this is describing that. You can kind of give you an idea of what's going on. So in the middle where it says PP, that is
Mm-hmm.
uh, that's where everyone's perspective and perception starts. So that circle is a birthplace. It also says birth right there. It points to that center as birth. The thing about each individual, this is the limitation part of perspective, is that, and I'm measuring it from eyesight. So when you're looking forward with your eyes, you only see 60% of that 360-degree circle. You're pointed in one direction, looking at 60%. And you can always like turn to the side for a moment and relate to that perspective, and then the other side. But you're always going to snap back to your front view of life, which is where you were actually born. So if you were born in a certain year, in a certain part of the year, and uh, a certain historical events were occurring, all these things are your perspective. And a good example of that is if you were born in the 60s, then it would be the sexual revolution that would probably be kind of an influence on your perspective of life. But today, it would be more of a racial perspective. So people who are born today are going to have more of a racial perspective because that's the explosion of information that they're born inside. So, but each individual is only going to have 60% of their direction. So another way of looking at it is that if you had a brother or a sister in your own family, they are going to be born facing the other way, right? Because they're not going to have the same perspective as you. They're going to have, they're going to be born another year and another set of influences. So they're going to be, their 60% of their view is going to be maybe even facing the opposite direction. And this is important because to have a collective conscious in a society, everyone has to contribute their own personal experience from their personal perspective, which is limited. So everybody has a different one. And you can start to see that machine working from that view of this. Now, so do you understand perspective a little bit, at least from this little diagram? that you're forced to look one way when you're born. You're forced to look
Mm-hmm.
straight ahead, and you only have 60% of
Mm-hmm.
360, right? And then your siblings born the other way, or your parents are born facing a totally different way,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
So just
because
like
that
the X chromosome and the Y chromosome.
what kind of not really actually. Good try.
Hmm. Okay.
Um, so your perspective is influenced by what you're observing and what you're experiencing in the very beginning of your life. So, if you're born in the Renaissance, you have a totally different perspective of life. Technology is very undeveloped. You can only have so much of a perspective from that time period. But then again, your sibling would be facing the other way. They would be born in a different month, in a different year, so they're going to have a different set of influences politically too, and sociologically. How you're adapting to your immediate environment is your perspective. So my sister being a female is going to have a completely different perspective agenda to her adaptation than I am with mine being a male. So this is important to understand so that when each human being grows and lives their entire life and has a career in other families or whatever, they're contributing to the collective their singular point of view, which is forced in a way. You're forced to have that one, not the other one. And that's the limitation that describes what's going on with why we have a psychology. And by the way, psychology is just behavior that you can detect. So the way to say that is the better way to say that is I might have a certain psychology, but you don't know what it is until I behave, right? I could die with all these thoughts. Another person probably have died with a lot of thinking going on and didn't get to display it. So we never knew it. And that's psychology. It's behavior. So when it becomes physical, whether it's a voice or an action, that's when psychology has a reality. So this is how you build the psychology from your perspective, where you were born, and only 60-degree view can you relate to, and all the people in the world have a different PPL, completely different PPL. That's what's fascinating about that. It's like a forced contribution to the collective psychology of the entire world. And then there's perception. So say two people closely had the same perspective, but one was raised by a parent that what was kind of negative, or maybe they have a birth defect or some type of handicap that's causing them to not be able to perceive things like somebody who had a clear mind and a comfortable environment to grow up in. The depth of their perception in their perspective is going to be plus or minus. So that's the perception part of this, which is also a limitation. So once you see perspective and perception as a form of limitations, yes, You have them, but they're limited according to other people. You don't have theirs. Then you can see why psychology is important in the collective psychology and conscious of society. All right, what you think on that so
Interesting.
far?
Interesting, Mr. Mark. It's
Yeah.
something what the psychology is all about. So the initial direction seems to be given, not a choice, isn't it? So what is this simply about free will? Is our life's journey primarily about navigating within this predetermined directional current, or do we have the power to fundamentally reorient it?
Well, the free will question, everybody loves that because it's you can prove it and then you cannot prove it.
Mm.
Uh, and it's a touchy area. You can never really solidify free will. But I can say this: um, free will is totally evident when it comes to the fact. And this is a harsh way of saying it, but this is your evidence. Um, you can check out at any time.
Mm-hmm.
You can just check out. You can just so you have free will. So you're willingly freed yourself to continue. As a basis and a foundation, you're completely free willed. See, one way of looking at it. So there's some reality there. The other one is that because of your PPL, which is your perspective and perception limitation, you're not free to do whatever, and you're not even inclined to do whatever. So you're not totally free to do whatever. You're only free to do what you've intaken. Um, there's a lot of twin studies, and there's inclinations to some of that, the DNA, with some of their thinking. But if you took a twin and raised them in America, and then took the other twin and raised them in a poor slum in India, you're going to have completely different um, adaptation perspectives, because basically what humans are when they're born is they're born in the cold weather, adapting to this environment, whatever that environment is. It's totally adaptation. So if you're in a comfortable environment, you're adapting to that. If you're in a more of a an environment that keeps you from necessities, and you're constantly alert. What if you're born in a war-stricken country? Um, your adaptation is completely different. But say this: you have free will, and here's another way of looking at free will. There's a whole alphabet of things to choose from. That's 27 different choices. But you can't do all 27, and really you can't even choose all 27. You can like just choose two. You can like choose between L and M. So that you're free will to choose from two things or three things. That's max. But you don't have the whole alphabet. So there's the free will expression of yes, you have free will, but then you kind of don't. And I don't think that the human culture could grow any other way. I think that each individual is forced to have a perspective, and hopefully they can get their perception from that perspective to go as far as it can. And that is the contribution to the pool of psychology that makes up our human culture and the growth of it as well. How does that sound?
Well, truly, truly empowering, Mr. Mark. Psychology is something else. It's hard to understand, but it's truly, truly empowering for us. Upon arrival and looking in Seth's direction, what is the very first thing that this entity perceive? Is it a fundamental duality or a primary need or an overwhelming sensory blur that only later gains meaning? according to your diagram?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, when you're born facing one direction,
Mm,
your view, meaning these are, you don't have that broad, you don't have the God perspective. You have just one individual, Chinese perspective. Um, and that becomes a major contribution to the giant collective growing psychology that is humanity. It needs that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's kind of like it doesn't matter if you're a good person or a bad person. It's still a major contribution to psychology, to the growth of psychology that humans need to identify with on a larger scale. Everybody's contributions to formulate that one single cultural identity. And you can see that change. You can see that actually that conscious growth worked that way too. So before COVID, the gender thing was there, but it wasn't significant. After COVID, it exploded into this gender diversity thing, and it was an unexplored area before in all of humanity. It was it was a territory that wasn't even available to explore. But eventually you got to bring that to the table. So to grow psychologically as a community, you have to go out and experiment with these ideas and find new avenues to grow psychologically. So basically, that's what every single expedition sociologically that humanity does. And after this, after 10 years of this, there'll be a whole new set of exploratory things as a collective psychology, that is. But that's how we identify with ourselves. That's how we know who we are. That's how we know who we are on the scale of something new, which is really important for each generation to see themselves as a new psychology with a better view and a better way. And was your question more specific on like an infant scale on a newborn?
mm-hmm. Yes, Mr. Mark. If you're an infant,
Yeah.
how you deal with it?
Yeah. Well, it's just input in the beginning. um, it's just input, and those are those very very first influences that force your perspective. Um, if you're born in a hostile environment, well, I've got plenty of friends that were born like that. My father was born in somewhat of a hostile environment, but he made great choices for himself in that perspective, and his brothers didn't make so many good choices. And I was not. I was really born in a kind of a really great space to use my mind, and I would say in infancy. Um, there's you want to know you belong to something, and the reason why that's important is because there's something about yourself you do not know, about, which is where you really came. Excuse me, where you really came from. You just know you're here and now, so that instills an insecurity, which is really important because that insecurity forces you to act and choose certain perspectives in order to become a more self-signified individual. If you weren't insecure about where you came from, then you wouldn't have that need. You wouldn't do anything. You wouldn't really do anything to signify your identity. So that little void in your identity is really important. And it's important for the human culture to grow from your actions and your inputs that go into that growth. And so you're kind of enforced to perform to signify that identity. But
Interesting, Mr. Mark. Go
okay,
ahead. Sorry.
I'm trying. But infancy, they say that psychologists say that by the age of 9 or 10 years old, you decided all of the major politics about yourself, your political perspective, your sexual perspective, and your individual perspective. And then you spend the rest of your life kind of unknowingly working those things out. It's kind of almost an embedded process in every human. And if you think really strongly into your core, when you were 8, 9, and 10 years old, you kind of remember, juggling a few things like, oh, am I going to be this way? Am I going to be that way? Do I like this? Do I like that? And then you made decisions. You chose, and this is before the age of 10. You chose these things, and then you kind of forgot about them. But your subconscious knows, and then you spend the rest of your life working out those details, whatever they are. And that scale of humanity is completely broad, from Musk to murderer, from everything. And I think that's an important gauge to have if you're going to have a growing, successful human culture. Successful in the sense that one day we'll be leaving planet Earth.
Yes.
So
Definitely.
it's all a contribution to that. Yeah. One way of tying it in.
Certainly, we need to leave on Earth, people, and find a place where we can live, because sooner or later we will explode, and we need to think something to go beyond our planet. So, to wrap up our discussion for today, Mr. Mark, you created a model to explain a perspective and perception limitations. What does the creation of this model itself reveal about your directional perspective and creativity of the environment in which you conceive it?
Yes. Well, this model kind of, it's not exact, but it's a description of what each human being, what happens to them psychologically in the very fundamental years of their life, and how they become individuals, and how they want to be somebody else really bad. If you think about that, there's a lot of people that get trapped in that. They don't join the perspective that they were given, right? They want to be the
Mhm.
other person's perspective. But that's one of the unfortunate things about being born. You didn't choose your sex either, I think. But you have to go with what you've been born with. And if you don't, you're not contributing to the collective. See? And that collective is our culture, and it has to be successful.
Certainly. Must be successful, people. And Mr. Mark, thank you for this amazing diagram that empowers us to know more what is truly a psychology is. So, would you like to plug in something?
Sure, I'm the author of Fungus Theory of Conscious Growth. It's on Amazon. And I have a webpage called marklchristiansen.com, where there's a whole universe of things to go and study and figure out fungus theory.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Mark L. Christensen, because if you support him, more and more empowering fungus fury will rise. And please do listen to our other podcast, Science 101, wherever you listen your podcast. And this will be available sooner or later on other platforms or podcast platform. For the meantime, we are live every week. So please tune in. So, Mr. Mark, thank you so much for your time.
Daniel, thank you too. Thank you for your audience and everything. Thank you.
Marticon people, see you soon.